There's a great anonymous quote, usually misattributed to C.S. Lewis, that says, "Hardships often prepare ordinary people for an extraordinary destiny." Of course, the reality is that most of us are ill-prepared to handle adversity when it comes, which is why we all need resilience. More than 50 years of scientific research has demonstrated that where you and I fall on the resilience curve, our natural reserves of resilience, affects practically everything. And if you increase your resilience, you can overcome pretty much anything that life throws at you. I mentioned in the previous episode that I plan to look into what world-class resilience researchers say are the key skills that you and I need to practice in order to become more resilient. So let's start by first looking at the 4 most common fundamental ways that we need and use resilience. To make them a little easier for you to remember, I'll call these 4 ways GRIT, G-R-I-T. So you need resilience when you want to G, grow up, R, remain steadfast, I, invert the pain, and T, thrive. So let's take a look at what each of these means. G, grow up. 1 Corinthians 13:11 says, "When I was a child, I spoke like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. But when I became a man, I put aside childish things." Now, the Greek word for put aside is katargeo, which literally means to idle down, to deactivate. So you need to idle down, you need to deactivate your childish thoughts. Now, Paul's primary point here is to give up childish views of love. That's the context. But that's a much bigger topic, maybe for another time. What I want to talk about now is about applying that same idea to a different kind of childish thought, something far more specific and personal. So let me give you a sanitized illustration from my own life because, this ain't no Dr. Phil or Maury Povich. You're not going to get any dirt here. I was born on February 29th, leap year. My birthday comes around once every 4 years, so it keeps me young. But I certainly wasn't supposed to be born a leap year kid. My mom slipped on some icy steps and went into labor a month ahead of her due date. So I was a pretty small baby, not even 5.5 pounds. I grew up in a fairly typical lower income urban setting. In those days, my dad drank a lot, and my parents divorced when I was in elementary school. My mom worked her fingers to the bone just to provide for me and my sister. And while I don't know for sure, I'd be surprised if the high school graduation rate in my entire extended family was better than the average for those days and that context, which is 50 to 60%. So why am I telling you all of this? Well, it's because resilience research has found that some of the greatest threats to our natural resilience are low birth weight, low socioeconomic status, low maternal education, and an unstable family structure. Sound familiar? But a threat is just that. It's a threat. Nothing is written in stone. Not everyone in difficult circumstances succumbs to the risk. Some children do just fine. Others even flourish, despite their backgrounds. But what absolutely is true is that many of us walk around with baggage from our childhood. I certainly did for many years. Eventually, though, I had to grow up. I had to start dealing with my childhood like an adult. I had to stop talking the way I did as a resilience-threatened child. I had to stop thinking about people and situations like I did as a resilience-threatened child. I had to stop reasoning like I did as a resilience-threatened child. Today, I don't see my childhood the way I used to. My childhood helped make me who I am today. I see my mom, my dad, and the lives that they endured with eyes of compassion and even, yes, wonder that can only come from trying to be a parent myself and realizing how incredibly difficult it can be, especially if the cards are stacked against you. So if we want to G, grow up, we need resilience. R, remain steadfast. 1 Corinthians 15:58 says, "But thanks be to God who gives us the victory through our Lord Jesus Christ. Therefore, be steadfast, immovable, always excelling in the Lord's work, knowing that your labor in the Lord is not in vain. Now, not everyone has a history that needs overcoming, but does that mean that resilience is less important for those? No, definitely not. Everyone needs resilience because everyone is confronted with the normal grind of life and its assorted problems and stresses and hassles. And you need the ability to face that challenge and consistently come out on top. Psychologists say that the essential ingredient in coping with the grind is what they call self-efficacy. Self-efficacy is this belief that you can master your environment and effectively solve problems as they arise. The result is that you stay committed to solving your problems. You don't give up easily, and you persist until you find a workable answer. Again, it seems to me that what is true in the spiritual sense has application in everyday ways as well. If self-efficacy is the belief that you can master your environment and effectively solve problems as they arise, then what does that look like if you also believe, as I do, that God Himself gives you victory through Christ? It means you absolutely can ready yourself, respond better, reduce the impact of those daily challenges. You can remain steadfast, immovable, always excelling in the daily assignments that God has for you, no matter what life throws your way. But to G, grow up, takes resilience. To R, remain steadfast, takes resilience. And to I, invert the pain, takes resilience. Now, invert isn't a word that most of us use every day, but its meaning is simple enough. Simply means to turn something upside down or inside out. Author and Drift CEO David Cancel says that inversion is the key to good problem solving. So you turn a situation or a problem upside down. You look at it backwards. What happens if all our plans go wrong? Where don't we want to go? And what roads would clearly take us to that unwanted end? Instead of looking for success, make a list of how to fail instead. By inverting, you identify up front all the ways you could fail and then establish a clear plan of attack for what you need to do in order to avoid those failures and get to your goal. Now, that's a very strategic, task-oriented way of thinking, but it is also part of what experts say help us to be resilient in a crisis. Unlike the everyday challenges that we all face, some adversities are truly deeply overwhelming, even traumatic, the loss of a loved one, or a job, or terrifying events, etc. But renowned trauma expert Dr. Judith Herman, author of Trauma and Recovery, says resilience can actually increase our resistance to that stress and has even been proven to lower someone's chances of developing PTSD following trauma. So you take the trauma and you turn it upside down. You invert the pain. You find a way to turn it into something positive. In the book, The Resilience Factor, Doctors Karen Rivich and Andrew Schatt give the example of Cindy Lamb and Candace Leitner, both moms who experienced extreme trauma due to a drunk driver. But they found a way to invert the pain, and they started MAD, Mothers Against Drunk Driving. And they converted that pain into the power to literally make a difference all around the world. G, growing up, takes resilience. R, remaining steadfast, takes resilience. I, inverting the pain, most certainly takes resilience. The last letter is T, thrive. Don't just survive. The same resilience that can help us overcome whatever life throws at us can also help us to broaden and enrich our lives in some really exciting and often unplanned ways. Some people live narrow lives. They have a routine that works for them and they stick to it. They feel comfortable, even happy. Life is best when it's predictable and known. I definitely fall into that category, at least generally speaking, despite the fact that some of the things I've done in my life certainly weren't predictable. But I've noticed that over the last 25 years, as I gain resilience, I've also gotten a little better at three things that resilience experts say are critical. assessing risk, knowing myself, and finding meaning and purpose in life. Being good at assessing risk means being able to forecast with accuracy. It's not extremely risk tolerant, nor is it extremely risk averse. It's knowing and understanding how, when, and where to take calculated risk. I'm getting better at that. Knowing yourself means understanding your current strengths and weaknesses, your behavioral tendencies and habits, and being comfortable with who you are without giving up that drive or vision for what you can become. And finding meaning and purpose in life includes being appreciative of what you have and being able to see the bigger picture. For me, that means understanding that my life must fit into the purpose and calling that God has for all His children, to know Him, to live for Him, to love others, and to bear much fruit for His kingdom. But this also takes resilience. Here's the bottom line. Maybe you're still carrying around baggage from your childhood. If so, it's time to idle down those influential thoughts. It's time to grow up. Or maybe you feel like the daily challenges of life are starting to knock you off course too often. If so, you need to learn how to remain steadfast. Or maybe you're drowning in a sea of pain that's caused by a serious crisis. If so, you need to find a way to invert the pain. Or maybe you're just tired of getting by, tired of doing the same old, day in and day out. If so, you need to learn how to thrive and not just survive. No matter which of these you and I can identify with, the answer is the same for all four. We need more resilience. And the first step is what Rivich and Schatt call learning your ABCs. That's the topic for my next episode. I hope you'll join me. Remember, a better mind always leads to a better life.